So, Monsoon, it's such a pleasure to have you here in Switzerland, in Klosters, in the mountains at Value X, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you just a little bit. And I thought that where I'd have you start off is I guess it's in Manhattan the night before the Buffett Lunch, which is when we first met. And I thought you could just, I know the story from my side, but perhaps you could tell the story of us meeting at the Buffett Lunch from your side.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Guy. It's so nice to be in Switzerland and did like a proper ski instruction class yesterday, so that was a lot of fun. But yeah, we met when I was a preteen, the night before the Buffett Lunch, and I think it was probably the first time I had been in Manhattan, and it was late at night, and you drove me and my sister and my father in your, I don't know what type of car, but a black car up, I think all the way from the bottom up to the Upper West Side. And we just had a great conversation. I think the first time we went to Cafe Lalo was also with you. And it's probably my favorite cafe, but it's temporarily closed right now.
It's a great shame, isn't it?
Yes.
And just to fill you in, your lack of expertise on sports cars, it was a convertible 911, in case you're interested, Porsche 911, that I still own today, that is downstairs in this building actually with the top down.
Very nice.
You and your sister amongst the very few people who actually used the very limited back seats.
Yes.
But so I thought that, it was extraordinary. You and your sister sat on either side of Warren at the lunch. And in those moments, I mean, the one point in the lunch that sticks in my memory of the two of you is that I'm calling Warren Mr. Buffett. And he looks at me and he says, look, Monsoon and Momitchi over here, they're already calling me Warren. And you will do by the end of the lunch, so why don't you just start now? I don't know
That's so cute.
Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
So what are your memories of it?
Few, but they are there. So I think he told us the most important decision is who we marry. It's just who you're with the rest of your life, every decision, and your partner. So that stuck with us. And we made a scrapbook for him of his whole life. And so that was a way for us to learn about him. And the most important memory we have is that he gave us M&Ms with his face on them. And we ate every single one.
Before you got home?
Yes, yes. We ate them all in New York.
But then I think that, so you've observed your father have this fascination with Warren, and then in a way that was not the only extraordinary experience you've had as a result of that. And so anybody listening, watching should know that I, at certain points, offered myself up to Monsoon Pabrai, who's Monsoon's dad, for adoption. So I gave him various options, because there are various dinners that Monish was invited to in Omaha where you could bring your partner or significant other or family member, but not a friend. And so I offered up to your father, Monsoon. I sort of said, well, Monish, I really don't mind. I mean, it could be a civil marriage, or it could be I could have a sex change, and then, or, you might want to adopt me. We might have to consult with your daughters first. But I remember there was a few Berkshire meetings where you would attend the Munger dinners, and I thought that you could share some memories from that. Now you're a little bit older, I guess.
I've been his date since I was 17 to events like that. And it's just fun. You get to meet a very special group of people, and you also get to hang out with members of the Munger clan. And I don't know, it's a nice, intimate setting, and it's a blessing to be there, I think.
Yeah, and you've actually become friends with some members of the Munger clan. So do you think that, can you tell who you would have become had you not had those experiences, and who you have become having had those experiences?
So the experiences where I'm his date in those rooms, it's just kind of exciting to be there with him, and it's more exciting for me as his daughter to see how far he's come. And just, he really is just like a small kid from Mumbai. But the experiences that shaped me were going to Dakshana in India, and the schools, and hanging out in rural India. I've seen so much of India and done road trips. And I think those have really helped me with humility and understanding where our place is in the world and how important and at the same time unimportant we are.
So thank you for doing that. So did you notice how I was trying to talk to Monsoon about meeting Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, and I know that you've met Bill Gates and others, and you're like, no, let me talk about Dakshana.
Yes. It's cooler, yeah.
Yeah, before we get there, there's something else so your parents are both immigrants to the United States, and if I've got it right, you and your sister were born in Chicago, and then at a certain point you moved to California.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm just curious to hear your experience of being effectively first-generation Indian in the United States. And I don't know much about it, actually. So,
so in Chicago, we were in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, and we left when I was 7. And we moved to Irvine, and then the neighborhood became predominantly 50% Asian, 50% Caucasian. And so I had a very cultural upbringing with the Indian background with a couple of my friends, but I also learned Mandarin in high school, would watch Korean dramas in middle school, and all my friends, for the most part, came from different Asian countries, and we were all first-generation Asian. And so it just was like it was competitive. We did a lot of Kumon. Math was the most important subject. But I think my parents were different from other Asian minority immigrant parents because they let us do what we wanted to do. They just wanted us to have core skills down, so speaking, writing, and math. I think they felt like those 3 were the most important to convey what you believe in and to be able to solve a problem. And then from there, wherever my interests were, they would really cultivate it. So if they noticed I liked reading Nancy Drew books, then my dad introduced me to John Grisham. And they just kind of cultivated us with the interests we already had. But in Irvine, it was a very heavy Asian neighborhood. So it was a very competitive high school and middle school environment.
And so I'm curious, tell me, maybe we'll get to us traveling in India together, but tell me about what was it like for you? Could you remember the first time you went back to India? What was that like for you as somebody who's now, you've lived in the US, your parents have been open, so they've allowed you to be exposed to the broad range of American culture, and now you go back to the mother country or the home country. How did that feel for you?
The first time I went back, I was 10 years old, and I went for a cousin's wedding. So that was just meeting family members I had heard of but never met before. That was fine. It was when I started doing the Dakshana trips when I was 14. That was just very eye-opening, and how lucky and blessed I am to have the education I had for free. With property tax and whatnot. But it's just a stark difference, and it makes you grateful for what you have and just exposes you to other parts of the world.
And I'm curious, so in my experience, I immigrated with my parents to the UK at age 11, and deep connections to South Africa and to Israel and other countries. And I remember sort of like going into a period of angst every time I'd go back to the quote mother country, because there were parts of which I felt completely at home and parts with which I felt completely alienated. And so I'm curious how you've managed and how other children of immigrant families manage the kind of dual identity that one can have, and where you come out on sort of answering questions like, but where are you from?
Yeah. So we have a term, ABCD, American born, confused Desi. And Desi is someone from the South Asian subcontinent. And so there's so many things I can't relate to. And there's so many things I can relate to because we do it in our house. So Bollywood movies, I can relate to anyone in India on that cultural topic. But I've always been drawn to India. And so I think I've been going once a year since I was 14. And then when I turned 21, I started going almost 3-4 times a year for work. Yeah. And then I ended up staying put in India for long stretches of time, so 3 months straight, then 2 months straight. And that really helped me practice my Hindi with the taxi drivers. and I was eating way more street food and getting way more involved. And I would go to work every day wearing a full Indian outfit and like thick eyeliner, which is the classic look. And I worked in like Mumbai's Midtown, so I felt like I was always drawn to India and I wanted to immerse myself, and I was fortunately able to do that. And so I feel very comfortable now when I visit, but it's so clear that I wasn't raised there. Right. I think like the way I walk, the way I talk, my confidence levels would be more like a American girl than an Indian girl.
And so you've brought up Dakshana a couple of times, and so not everybody listening to this will know about Dakshana. And it clearly, you brought it up to me, Dakshana in a way had a far greater impact than even meeting Warren and Charlie. Yeah. And had a far greater impact, it seems to me, like your family visit. So perhaps you can tell somebody who hasn't heard about Dakshana what Dakshana is, and then about your first visits to wherever you got dragged or taken. And I think that what's interesting is I know that many people will know about Dakshana, but I've never heard you talk about Dakshana. So
Dakshana is a nonprofit that aims to alleviate poverty through education. And so the foundation tests students around the age of 15 or 16. We take the top performing students who will come from the poorest backgrounds and poorest villages, and then we train them pretty intensely for 2 years. And we now have we used to do just engineering, IITs, which is the Indian Institute of Technology, which has a 1.5% acceptance rate. And Dakshana, I think from the beginning or early on has had over 50%, sometimes 70%, sometimes just in that range, acceptance rate, which is extremely high. And then we do the same thing for medical school in India. And that way we have more girls who are interested in medical school. And so then they go through engineering or medical school, and then a few years out, they start earning enough to alleviate their families and change their family situation. And then they can actually educate their younger siblings or other people in their family. And so it's a very powerful model. And I think I really like it because it combines heart and head. And the problems that come up with running a foundation like that are very different than running a business. But you would apply the same strategy and we've done small trials of other ways to alleviate poverty, but we've had to close them down. But it's just been a lot of fun. And after I graduated college, I joined Dakshana in a strategic role to try and work on my own small initiatives there.
And so can you describe, I would agree with you, the visits that I've done to Dakshana locations with your father have had a huge impact on me. Yes. And I have not visited Dakshana Valley in Pune, but Laurie, my wife, has, and it had a huge impact on her. And while you're talking, it makes me think that I need to make all three of my children visit in some way or form. But perhaps can you share because if you can sort of like share your experiences, perhaps the first time or your first impressions. And, I don't know, I mean, when your father came and said he wanted to take you to India to visit Dakshana, maybe you were like a teenage girl and you're like, I have no interest, or how did that unfold and what did you learn and why?
So I have an adventurous spirit, so I was always excited to take a look at what's going on. I can't remember the first one, but I think I've made over 8 or 9 trips. Mm-hmm. And we would go to like a different corner, different region, and usually visit 5 to 10 homes. And so, yeah, I mean, sometimes we went to a home and my father introduced me and said, oh, this is my daughter, Monsoon. And they look horrified because they say, oh, we lost our home to a monsoon in 2006. So, that has a huge impact if you're hearing that, right?
In your case, it's just a name.
It's just a name. And yeah. So I think, but to have your whole house wiped away from a flood. Another time we came to a home where the father wasn't there because he had touched a live wire and passed away. So it's just dangerous conditions. They are extremely poor, and they're doing so well, most of them, honestly. And there's a couple who I keep in touch with who live in the United States. And I get to get dinner with them and talk to them about their PhD program or how their engineering job is going. And it's so exciting because 10 years ago I saw them at home with their family.
So these are Dakshana scholars
Yes.
who've made, and so, you know, we could spend a whole few hours talking about Dakshana and the stories that it's already created because it's transforming lives, which is really inspirational, actually. I would tell you I'm quite envious of you and your father to be involved with such an incredible charity. And there's an incredible letter that Dakshana has received from Warren Buffett saying that the Dakshana annual report puts the Berkshire report to shame, or something like that. It's somewhere online to see. But so you've ended up, as the expression goes, you've fallen not that far from the apple has fallen
Yes.
not that far from the tree. Tell me how that unfolded. So now, today, just bring up to the present day, you are also an investor. So tell us about how that happened.
Yeah, so I think growing up, I had an idea of what my dad and mom did for work. And my opinion of my father was, oh, he makes wealthy people wealthier. Tush, I don't want to do that. That's whatever. And but he talks about it a lot at home, and so, you know, we hear about it. I had been to the Buffett Lunch. I would go to all his annual meetings and hear him speak, and as I got older and older, it made more and more sense, or I could understand what he was saying. Then I went to college, and on a whim, pitched a stock to the Berkeley investment group, and I pitched MasterCard, and I had so much fun researching it. And I think you had MasterCard around that time too, and
Still do.
You still do. That's awesome. Don't sell. And I sold. I had tripled my investment, and I had sold like some babysitting money, but I had such a thrill doing that research, and it was minimal research. It wasn't complicated, but then I still felt like the cause wasn't the best, and I think I talked to my father about that, and he introduced me to Srinivas Pulavarti, who at that time ran the endowment at UCLA, and we got to talking, and he let me come intern for 2 summers, and that was the best experience ever. I got to read every major investor's quarterly letters back to like 15, 20 years. Even investors they hadn't invested with, I could see everything, and really got a feel and loved it. And all I wanted to do was work at an endowment. And then I talked to them when I was graduating, and they said no. They said, you should really go do equity research. So then I mailed my resume to a lot of hedge funds in the US, and got a job at a value fund in LA that wanted to send me to India. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever, to be able to do value investing in another territory. You want to, and you know, I've heard it growing up. You want to go fishing where nobody else is fishing. You want high rates to compound at. We weren't seeing that in the US. In India, we were seeing incredible rates of growth. And so that was just, I spent 2 years working with them, and it was the best.
Yeah. And so I just want to dive in on, so I think that, and so for the viewer, listener, what's sort of really interesting in the connection that Monsoon and I have is that we've both learned, I was describing somewhere that even though we're completely different ages, I feel like Monsoon is a kind of a sibling. When I've traveled with Monsoon and her dad, and we're like siblings together with her dad. And I understand the reason why now, Monsoon, which is that you and I both have learned enormous amounts
Yes.
from your father. And one of the things that your father taught me was how to stay in touch with people. I mean, I've told many times the story of sitting on a plane, an internal flight in India, watching your father signing holiday cards and thinking, why am I not signing holiday cards? He's here sitting in an airplane. And so you talked about sending out your resume. How many people did you send out? Well, 2 questions. Did you understand the power of doing what I think that you did before you did it?
Yes. So I had started, I think my freshman year of college. I didn't know where I wanted to intern that summer. And so I just sent 50 letters in the mail under my father's insistence to random companies. And I think I didn't even know what they did. I sent it to Charles Schwab. I sent it to just anywhere with the San Francisco headquarter address, and interned for a really nice guy, Harold Mann at Mann Consulting. He ran an IT consulting firm. But Schwab responded. And that was surprising, because then I realized how large they were. And so I had seen it kind of work at a young age, and I would just start sending a few every summer just to see if I wanted to work somewhere. And then my senior year of college, in the first semester, I sent 400 letters out, and I got 4 interviews, no job offers.
Yeah.
And then over the winter break, I worked on it harder, and I sent out 750 letters in the mail, and then I got 2 job offers, and about, I think, 7, 8 interviews. So it's a 1% hit rate for interviews, but they still have to like you to want to hire you. So it is a numbers game, and that was really when I saw how powerful it was. And so even now in the business, I send books out and holiday cards, and I fully subscribe to the mail campaign.
And I would just tell you, to give you a rest from your wonderful answers to these questions, is that it's been a source of frustration for me. So I had done it randomly. The first internship I got was with an Austrian bank called Kreditanstalt in London. I'd sent out 40, and somehow I'd figured that out. But I really properly connected to that idea with your father, and I realized the kinds of numbers you're talking about are what one needs to do. And because the response rate is somewhere between 1% and 4%, and as you said in your first one, it was 1% with no happy result. And there was somebody in my life where he's applying for internships at law firms in London, a law graduate, and he's like, yeah, well, I've applied to 5 and I haven't got a positive response yet, and he's doing it serially one after the other. And I said, get back to me after you've sent 1,000 out. And by the way, if you do 1,000, you'll get economies of scale, and you'll figure out the exact wording of the letter, and so you'll kind of like get better at it. And it's kind of frustrating and disappointing for me, because I know very, very few people who've actually followed through, and it's such a powerful thing, and it's so simple, and it's a key to success, really. And I very much hope that my children are in your, they won't reject the lessons of the parents, if you like.
I think they won't. They're good kids, yeah.
And it's lovely. So one of the times Monsoon and I have hung out without her fathers with my daughter, and who's now in New York, like Monsoon. So let's go to the last part of this, which is that you've become kind of an expert in India.
I don't know if I would say expert, but... Yeah.
But not just India. So the fund that you run is global, I imagine.
It's global.
And but you have a number of Indian investments, and I guess, and Monsoon sent me something beforehand, which is really excellently written, actually, investing in Indian public equities. If you're very lucky and you reach her through email or perhaps social media, maybe she'll send it to you. This is actually, it's superb, actually, really, really superb. So, and I was really fascinated to read about United Breweries and Heineken and Diageo. And so I guess why don't, just to kind of like, because we can't cover it all, and Monsoon presented on a really, really fascinating real estate idea that made me think a little bit of the Four Seasons. I'm not even going to mention the name, but perhaps you could just like round out the final part of this thing that is too short and tell us a little bit about United Breweries. I hope you don't mind me saying the name. And then a little bit about what's going on in the financial services industry. So I'll start you off with United Breweries, and then we'll segue over to financial services.
So it's United Spirits, but I mentioned both in the note. And Vijay Mallya had inherited Kingfisher, which has hard alcohol and beer from his father and father's father, and was corrupt and basically fled India and went to the UK, and they sold the assets. They split it, so all the beer assets went to Heineken under United Breweries, and the hard alcohol assets went to Diageo, United Spirits, and so they're run by much cleaner alcohol, worldly conglomerates with local, like a really good local team in India for both. But I like United Spirits more just because India taxes hard alcohol not on percentage of alcohol in the bottle, but the volume of the bottle. So you have beer that ends up being really expensive, and you have whiskey that, compared to the kick you get, is cheap. So it's one of the rare places in the world that's a whiskey market and a hard alcohol market. And you know, traditional Indians don't drink and whatnot, but the modern age really likes it. And so the average age of an Indian is 28, I think. And you're just seeing a general modernization of India happening. And so United Spirits is, I mean, alcohol is a great retirement stocks, but United Spirits, particularly with India and the way the taxation works, is one of my favorite just long-term holds you can have in your portfolio.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm going to follow up and learn as much as I can about it. So 2 statistics just struck me when it came to your discussion of financial services, which was that the total retirement assets in India right now is something like 500 billion, which is minuscule.
Very small.
Yeah, and that the ratio of retirement assets to GDP is like 15%, whereas in the US it's like 200%, I believe.
Very high, yeah.
Yeah, and so, but I guess I'm gonna, you know, you can talk about the idea that's in this document, although you can leave it hidden so that people need to reach out to you for it.
Yes.
I think that specifically financial services and leveraged financial institutions is just such a dangerous place in any country. And so now you're investing in India in the financial services sector for understandable reasons, but how do you walk through that minefield yourself of finding the ones that are not misreporting, over-leveraged, you know, didn't underwrite their loans properly?
Yeah, so India just went through a blow-up in 2018, where a bunch of them had basically come down a lot. Someone, I can't remember the name, wrote, was giving false ratings. And then they re-rated, and then the whole thing kind of
I know
shat
all
the
about
bed.
that.
Yes.
So Care Ratings and ICRA were
Yes.
giving A ratings to NBFCs that went bankrupt.
Yes, yes. And so that kind of re-rated the whole environment. And I mean, my favorite pick collapsed from 300 rupees a share to like 35, 40 rupees a share, which became a really good time to buy it. And it's now doing great. It's run by a great guy. But I think I agree with you. It's a little bit hard to figure out what's going on specifically. So the way I do it is I just make an Indian financial services bet, and I have it split between 3 names.
Yeah.
And that way, if something happens to one or something, it's okay if the rest survive. But the way I do it is 10% cost of capital. So let's say everything goes to 0, then I just lose 10%.
Yeah.
And that is a little bit more comfortable for me. But I view investing in India right now like investing in financial services in the US in the 80s.
Yeah.
It's really, I mean, it's wild. It's really cool because Indians are, for a long time, only liked investing in, you know, gold, real estate, fixed deposits, but you're seeing the young generation move into retail. And so I think before the pandemic, there were 40 million brokerage accounts in India, and after the pandemic, there were 100 million.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was within a really short period of time. And we kind of saw that in the US too, with more people on Robinhood and GameStop and other things, but we have a lot more players in the Indian market.
It's so many rich areas to explore, and I'm going to be run out of time shortly. So I guess last sort of like area of just sort of, you know, so it's lovely to have you for this truncated and short conversation. What are you looking to get out of the next few years? If somebody hears you and connects to you, how can they connect into you? What are the appropriate ways? Should, you know, you can invite them to give to Dakshana. Maybe there's ways to find you. Feel free. And I'm going to end with a book or 2 recommendations.
Okay, perfect. The best way to find me is Twitter. No, I think if anyone has anything interesting they want to talk to me about, just send me an email. And if I'm intrigued, I will respond. There's a few I'm going to be honest, I don't respond to just because it would take, I think, too much time. But the only thing I would like to tell people is that, you know, hustling goes really far. and you don't really know how hard you've worked till it pays off. And so, yeah, I think on like the resume thing in particular, I think if you're going to reach out to any investor, send a stock pitch. I get so many inbounds, and I'm like, well, I don't know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
At the very least, I should be able to see that. So I think that would be my tip to anyone.
Yeah, and write it up really well, and give them a slice of your mind. In this case, give Monsoon a slice of your mind, because otherwise
there's a higher chance I'll connect with them.
I mean, I think and there's a whole area of discussion there that I wish I could go into. But last question to you. I'm very grateful for the books that you send me. What's on your reading list? What have you read? What do you think about in the book world?
So the best book last year is What I Learned About Investing from Darwin by Pulak Prasad. And he runs a fund called Nalanda Capital in Singapore, where they invest in Indian equities. And they're the only people I've seen do this, but they have their current holdings and their past holdings on their website.
Yeah,
I've never seen anybody do that, and I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
And for anyone that wants to inspire someone younger or someone new to investing, I really like The Deals of Warren Buffett, First 100 Million by Glenn Arnold. And I think he just goes through the cases pretty simply, and it was just a good read.
Yeah, thank you. I have not read that book, so I'm looking forward to reading it. Monsoon, thank you for braving the cold. I'm not surprised by somebody who's climbed Mount Kilimanjaro.
Thank you.
But it's really, really lovely to have you here in Zurich, Switzerland, and thank you for making the time.
Thank you so much for having me.